I was started working on a dog game because
Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I'm joined by Al Gonzalez. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself over there?
Good, good. A mutual friend of ours, Spike, had sent you my way. You're a board game designer or tabletop game designer,
Mm,
and you have your second game up on Kickstarter right now. And as always, there will be links in the description and the
mm.
pinned comment afterwards. Um, and it is a tea-based game.
Yes.
So, how did you get inspired to make a game about tea? Or, we can even start before that and like, how did you get inspired into becoming a board game designer or tabletop
Oh,
game
sure.
designer?
So, how did I get inspired? Well, there is, ever since I was in high school, which is a long time at this point, I have wanted to make games. Started wanting to make video games. So, I went to college for computer animation and game design. And then very quickly learned that that is way too much work for me to do on my own. Because, like when you're an independent artist, you got to do as many of the roles as you can before other people get interested in the project. So I put it away on a shelf, went to school for other things, wound up, doing film and television. But game design has always been there. Like I've always sat down with other people and like helped them like make new tabletop engines. And we made like a couple of RPGs while I was in college. And when I got back to LA from college, I got involved with this organization called Indiecade, which is a fantastic. If y'all haven't heard of it, it's a game festival that happens in Los Angeles about October every year, and they showcase independent and small games, kind of like the Sundance of the video game space. And I got involved volunteering there and doing photography and video editing and trying to find game clients because I wanted to work on games as a designer, like a graphic designer. Um, and then I met some folks, and they were like, "Well, you're already really good at the art thing. Why don't you just make a board game?" And I was like, "Oh, that's so silly. Where would I find the funding for that?" And they're like, "So there's this thing called Kickstarter." um, and I was introduced to that through. I mean, it's going to sound like I'm name dropping, but literally, like the person who introduced me to it was Max Temkin at the time, because we were both helping this organization, and he was really great and encouraging, and just being like, "Look, just go do the thing, and people will like it." And then we made Cantankerous Cats, my first game with my old partner, and that went on to be a huge success, actually, for an indie. We moved about close to 10,000 copies over the course of a couple years. Like Kickstarter, it went great. We funded, it was like 153%. And that was basically just how it started. Because we're like, well, we made this thing. Let's see if we can do a few more. And I've contracted for, like AEG and indie boards and cards and a couple people since that game to kind of get a better feel for the space and try to build a reputation as being a good like visual designer and consultant.
So,
Um, yeah.
with those companies, did you work on as a designer or did you work in as an illustrator?
I worked as a graphic designer specifically.
Okay.
So like with AEG, I worked on Atelier with my friend Josh Wood, who you all might know him from Cat Lady or Santa Monica or Tiny Towns. Those are the three big games that he worked on for AEG. And basically did a lot of also like, not necessarily like explicit rule cleanup because these teams are small. It usually just comes up where like I'll see something as the graphic designer working on a thing and then encountering like an interface issue or a rule clarification issue because I have to do the copy. And
Yeah, yeah.
just kind of going back and forth and going like, okay, so I know I'm just doing your art, but I also found a few things. Can we talk about them? And then usually the answer is, oh my God, yes, this is great. Having an extra set of, like basically having an extra set of game designer eyes on the project, even though I'm working on a different component of it, like that final catch.
So, would you
Um,
say doing that first Kickstarter kind of helped you to like break into the industry to work for other people as well?
yes, definitely, because people would look at Cantankerous Cats and see how well it was executed and the art, and then just 100% no question. Okay, yes, we'll be more than happy to hire this person because your last game looks impeccable.
Yeah, so it becomes this. You have a body of work they kind of selling, so you can speak to. So, can you tell us a little bit about cantankerous cats? I imagine
sure.
it involves cats, and they're cantankerous.
No, they're so cuddly and sweet, and I hate cats. No, so cantankerous cats is basically like the short gamer version is it's like Magic the Gathering, but with cute, adorable cats. So it's a very similar sort of take that PvP. You are accruing affection, which is the mana in this game, and then you're trying to cause mischief all around the house after you accumulate that affection. So you're breaking things, you're scratching children, you're doing all the terrible things that we know cats do. Right after they expose their tummy and cuddle you and do all the cute things.
Yeah.
And the aim of the game is to score 9 mischief points. And you do that, again, accumulate affection, that's the currency. And then when you have enough affection, you turn around and you bat someone across the face, and then you wander away like nothing happened. And that's how you score points.
Pretty much standard cat stuff.
Yes, pretty much standard cat stuff.
So what made you decide to make this game where you're going to play evil cats fueled by affection?
Not evil, cantankerous. But honestly, it was just, again, after that whole Indiecade, working on there for a couple of years and just encountering people, we sat down and we're like, well, what's something that we want to make a game about? And at the time, we had gone off on like a little weekend camping trip, me and my partner at the time. And we're like, well, we played a bunch of cat games because we love cats on the board game space. And we saw that none of the games had anything to do with cats. It was just like window dressing. So we've played all the cat things, we're like, this is great, but I don't feel like I am a cat or I am a person who loves cats in this game. So we basically just drafted a list of like, well, the joke in cats is they don't love you because they love you. They love you because they get things from you, right? Like they feed you. It's a transactional thing. They're mercenaries.
I don't think that's a joke at all. I just think you described cats.
So yes, the camera went out of focus. There we go. So the cultural joke there is what we decided to run with. And we were like, well, how about you are the cat and you are playing this game with the people that you live with. So the humans are your toys, are your game pieces as a cat. And the game is how skillfully can you toe the line between being really shitty and really adorable without getting thrown out of your house. And that was basically it. We designed the core of the game in like 2 or 3 days and then spent the next couple of years, building the look and the assets and the lore and, like really dialing everything in.
Yeah. I feel that in my soul, being a pet owner for a long time. And I've definitely had some cats that have gotten thrown outside.
Yeah, you're like, nope, you got to stay out there now.
you are now an outside cat. We'll give you all the things you need, but you cannot be inside.
Yes, you are clearly too much for this house to handle.
Yeah, well, cats. We have a couple cats now, a couple chinchillas, and a dog. So we are kind of a pet house, and my partner Ted has got even more things. I think like they're breeding snakes over there, and
oh my,
3 cats and mice and fish, everything but dogs.
I think that's the first time I've heard of someone being a snake breeder.
Yeah. Well, actually, oddly enough, my father used to breed all kinds of reptiles, including different snakes. For whatever reason, his son wanted a snake, and they made him do all the research on figuring out what kind of snake he was going to get. And they really didn't want to have to give it anything living.
Yeah, that's always a little disconcerting if you have to do that.
So they found these egg-eating snakes. Oh. Yeah, and it's like they they swallow whole eggs, and then they got like I guess like a tooth or something inside, where they just
Huh.
squeeze it and it cracks it, and then they spit up the shells.
Holy
So
cow.
yeah. And then his son got the idea that he wanted to breed them and make turn it into a business as well as having the pets. So
Nice.
yeah,
Well, congratulations. That sounds like a pretty cool alternative for having to feed the snake live
yeah.
live
So
critters.
I use it to bludgeon my children with. I'm like, why couldn't you be so industrious?
Oh my god. You go breed snakes. Go breed birds.
Do something.
Yes. Right on.
So, what is your kind of like the design philosophy behind creating tabletop games?
Cool. For me, I'm a theme first person. So I think there's plenty of especially board games out on the market that are driven by mechanics already. And as somebody like, I'm super avid board game player, and I always find it difficult to teach a lot of abstract stuff to my friends, because if you've got an engineer brain like me, you can see it. You can see the systems at work when you just kind of look at a game, but most people don't. And that informs my philosophy when I design games, or even when I work on other people's games as a designer, as a graphic designer, I should say. I want to bring theme to the center because it helps inform people what they're supposed to be doing when they're playing the game, when it's executed well. So like for Prosperity, the game I've got out now, you run a tea shop. So you're collecting ingredients and then you're blending tea for people that are waiting in line at your shop. And that's basically it. So it's a pretty straightforward game. It's a simple game. But the theme makes it more approachable for people because they have a narrative to hook into. Like, oh, okay, cool. So this is my goal. In Cantankerous Cats, it is you are a cat. You live in a house with your pet human.
Yeah.
You smother that human with affection and then cause as much mischief as you can without getting thrown out. That's the game. And that's the narrative through line.
So are you a tea aficionado?
Oh, yes. I even made tea, both for Prosperity and for Cantankerous Cats. So I've taken the leap to working with a chef to actually make my own tea blends.
Nice. So, were you a tea aficionado before the game? And you're like, you know what the world needs? It needs a game about owning a tea shop.
Yes, basically. So I know other games have already existed, like Chai is out there and it's great. But it's a big box. It's still kind of a big box game. And
Yeah.
I still saw room, because I was working on Prosperity a little before Chai came out. I still saw room to do a simpler game because I wanted to make a simpler game than Cats. And I wanted to make a really casual friendly game. And my other MO outside of being theme first is I just want to make games about things that I love, because if I don't, then it's work. So after Cats, we made catnip tea to go with the game, and people bought a lot of it. So we basically were just like, well, why don't we just do a 2 game? Because we already know a lot about it between me and the chef. Like, I worked at a coffee shop for like 10 years. I had started working on the coffee game, which is my medium box game idea. And then decided, well, I don't want to spend another 3 or 4 years working on this game. I want to release another game now. How can I shrink that idea to like the cup? And we decided, again, tea, because that's the other thing that we could do. In tea culture, it's not really about the macroeconomics so much, which is what I'm doing with the coffee game. It's about like that really intimate experience about enjoying a cup of tea. And really focusing on it. And that's basically how it popped out. We're like, yeah, we're going to do tea. We already know a lot about it. We got pretty art. A lot of it is really highly stylized photography mixed with watercolor art. And it's a theme that's also universal. So people that aren't into games can get interested in games.
So do you do all the art in addition to all the design as well?
For prosperity, yes. So this is my, it's also my COVID project, as I told another interviewer. So I had started working on the game before the pandemic, but like I finished it during the pandemic because I had nothing else to do. And I'm like, well, can I do this all by myself? I enlisted help from one other artist from Cantankerous Cats, Jose Pimienta. So I asked them to come in and do the pencils for all the plants and stuff so I could focus on doing all the graphic design and everything else. And then I came in and hand painted everything with watercolor. The tea ingredients are all photographs, but I dolled them up with like accents and watercolor embellishments to make it look more like the paintings that I made. And that was basically it. Like the whole driving theme was just to make everything as like National Geographic accurate as possible and be really about those ingredients. So people could look at the game and know exactly what they're doing, exactly what they're looking at. And if you are a tea aficionado, you actually can identify all the ingredients in the game if you took all of the visuals away.
So, if you're not a tea aficionado and you get into this game, you might accidentally learn some stuff about tea.
Yes. Just like, go ahead.
So I was going to say, with Cantankerous Cats, you took the theme of cats and you're like, okay, mischief, getting into trouble, affection, and these translate into mechanics. How did you do that with prosperity tea? Oh, sorry, I can't talk.
No worries. With prosperity, basically, again, the experience is about being the shop owner and blending that perfect like blend of tea that you're going to put out there for the world. So the mechanics is pretty simple. It's the same thing that we do when we blend tea for Cantankerous Cats or this game, or like when they do, when the chef, St. Bastian's Tea Company, does all of their other stuff because they do live events and whatnot. They make special blends. Process is, I got to go look for that stuff. Like first I'm going to think about the flavor profile, which is the order marketplace in prosperity sits in the center of the table. So you already know what teas people want. You're like, okay, cool. Maybe I want to make that English breakfast. Maybe I want to make that Earl Grey. So I need to go figure out what's out in the world. And there's a few order decks at the top of the table. And then you source the ingredients from there. You decide how much money you're going to spend. The more money you spend, the more cards you get. But you can always kind of ask for a handout for free if you don't want to spend anything. And then you fill that order, you take cash, or you proudly display it in your tea shop so everybody knows you made this tea. And that's kind of the aim of the game, is you want that prestige of being the tea shop that's made, like this assortment of teas. So it's all about your reputation. Money only gets you so far. But if nobody knows that you're making tea, then then you don't win the game, basically.
So on the Kickstarter, when you order the game, does it come with tea?
Yes, it comes with tea. It comes, every copy of the game ordered through Kickstarter will come with tea.
Nice. So you not only do you get a fun game to play, you also get some beverage to go along with it. Also, can we circle back to catnip tea? That's a thing? Is that for the cats or for people?
Catnip tea is a thing. That's how it all started. So the catnip tea we did as a joke for Cantankerous Cats. We weren't expecting it to taste very good because we had not used that ingredient before.
Cats love it.
Right. And cats love it. And we did the research and we're like, oh, okay, well, catnip was used for medicinal purposes for a long time, for upset stomachs and things like that. And we put it in the tea, hoping that cats would kind of open people's mail. Because even though they were vacuum sealed, cats and dogs can smell a lot better than we can.
Oh, yeah, we can.
So those pictures happened. Like people sent us photos of like their cats opening the mail and like, oh my God, my cat opened my game. And then they tasted the tea and a lot of people were asking us like, can we buy this? Because it's really good. And that's basically how it started. And now,
are you telling me you put it in there as kind of like a joke?
Yes, we put it a tiny little 1 cup sample as a joke. And the joke worked, and it worked real well because we kept selling the tea.
I imagine you had to check and make sure it was safe for humans first.
Yes, we did test it, and we did the research.
Yeah.
And we've been selling it for about 3 years. Pre-pandemic, I had even made it to Seattle, and there were 2 cat cafes in Seattle that were carrying the tea, as like you could go up to the bar and order it. So Seattle Meowtropolitan is kind of like our good friend and connection up there. And they started carrying it, and people started loving it because they ordered. Like we went up there in like October for a show they were putting on, and they put in 3 more orders of tea before the new year because people just kept buying it.
So did you accidentally start a tea business?
Yes, we accidentally started a tea business because, you know, like, well, it's accident in part because, like, you know, as a game designer, I love making games, but I'm also like in marketing and design. So, you know, it's all about IP, right? Like intellectual property. How can you expand the brand? And it's all labeled with cantankerous cat stuff with all the cute art and everything on the labels. And it's mostly a way to try to make a business sustainable, or at least to try to prove that we can have a sustainable business model without having to worry about cranking out a game every 3 months. Like, because I want to do that. I want to make games, but I'm like, I tell people my approach is more like the Blizzard approach. I don't want to put out a lot of games. I just want to put out the ones that I like.
Yeah.
And the ones that I feel really compelled are like great ideas. But you can't do that as a game design company. So you have to have other things. And for us, it just made sense to do the tea stuff. And this was the year that I was going to go out and really start pushing it, because whenever we would take the tea to shows and craft fairs and conventions, we would always sell out. We would I'd have no more games and no more tea at the end of the conventions.
So how did cats like that tea?
Oh, they love it.
Have you done any like pet expos or anything?
Yes. CatCon is actually the one that we did the most.
Yeah.
And that's here in LA.
Yeah.
And it's an adorable convention. It's the most fun at a convention I've had in a long time. And again, like I go to that show every year, and I sell, you know, like more games and tea, like more merch than I do at any other gaming convention combined. Because
there's 2 things that people will spend like stupid, ridiculous amounts of money on, and that is their pets and their children.
Yep. And we tap that market pretty hard at CatCon.
Yeah.
And then for other conventions, like we definitely do the game conventions and stuff too. And surprisingly, the tea moves there as well. Like I'll take like a small amount.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm going to a board game convention. I don't need to bring tea to this one. And then people are like, why are you out of tea?
Yeah. Well, I feel like gaming goes hand in hand with beverages, right? Yeah. So, you know, and, you know, me personally, I like to drink a lot of coffee, so I could definitely see that some people aren't coffee drinkers; they drink tea instead for some reason. Mm-hmm. But you know,
yeah, it's delicious. But maybe down the road there will be a cup of coffee that comes with the coffee game.
Yeah, there you go.
I got to keep this trend up.
What beverage will you go with next after coffee? What does that leave?
Oh, I probably not. Like I've got an idea for a sustainable gardening game that I actually want to make. Specifically, like, you know, building organic garden beds and making a little community about it. It's still very rough, but that's probably the next thing. So it's like cat game, tea game, finishing the coffee game, and then going on to, like, you know, there's also a hiking game that I want to do. I know there are a couple on the market, but I've played them and they still don't jive for me as somebody that, like, I work at REI part-time. So it still doesn't like capture the informative bent that I usually have, like with Prosperity. So I want to make a game that's all about like prepping for the hike.
Brian says beer.
Ooh, beer. There are some good ones for beer. I don't know enough about that subject yet,
Yeah.
But in 3 or 4 years, who knows?
Yeah. It just depends on how long the pandemic lasts. A couple more
Yeah.
months and you might be an expert on beer.
Yes, yes. Like I do love a good microbrew. So like I think for me that subject is interesting as a consumer because I love to enjoy like the flavor profiles of all the different beers, especially like here in LA, we have a surprising amount of good microbrew that happens. Um, but it's also a pretty complicated process. So, and there's a couple of games out there that do a pretty good job of it already. So I would have to play them and see if there's room to have like the casual version. Like, what's the casual beer game look like?
Yeah.
And how do we get in and make a game that is approachable for people that are like, I don't know what game is. What is game? But still give them enough meat to come back.
So Brian has a question. This one might be a little bit challenging. We'll see. We'll see if we can cross your tea knowledge with our D&D knowledge here.
Sure.
So playing D&D, and my niece rolled up a witch character. She wants to brew potions. Any ideas for a tea brewing warlock patron?
Oh, yes. So thankfully, I also play D&D. I can feel this. I'm going to pull up, I know this is a live show, but I'm going to use the magic of the internet and pull this up because I was looking it up for our Kickstarter.
Okay.
There is they could do tea reading or base it on that. And there is a term for it. Let's see. NPR actually did a thing about it. Let's see if I can find that article. And the word is weird because, you know, it's an old profession. So it's Latin. Here it is. Tasseomancer.
Tasseomancer.
Yes, that is the name. That is the proper name for somebody who reads tea leaves. It's a tasseomancer. Or the profession is known as tasseography or tasseomancy.
I learned something today.
Yeah. Hold on. Is there like, can we post links in the chat? Oh,
yeah, you should be able to. Sometimes it gets weird.
Yeah, drop it in the chat. You can copy paste that. So yes, in ye olden times, and still, you know, some modern witches do this because when you practice witchcraft and the Wicca, it's really personal. But a lot of people have this, like, my very broad understanding is you read the shapes of the tea leaves at the bottom of the cup.
Mm-hmm.
And the future, you know, your predictions and your readings are based on what you find there and what shapes the tea leaves fall in. Says something about the person who is drinking that cup of tea, because, you know, the energy from the person goes into the cup and all that whatnot. So that might be a good base to use for your D&D character, is to have a little chart or base it on actual tasseomancy charts that are in the real world, and like kind of create your role-playing equivalents based on that. That help?
I spelled it so badly I got tacomancer instead.
Tacomancer. I mean, I would love to have a tacomancer.
I think so. The tacomancer is where it's at for sure.
So there you go, tasseomancy.
Tasseomancer. I'd also probably work well as a diviner, wizard too. You just reflavor it a little bit, especially with their main abilities being portents and kind of like seeing what's happening in the future.
There we go. Yeah, there we go. Brian picked up on the other details. So sometimes they make special cups for this profession, so the leaves interact with the little lines in the bottom of the cups. And it's really great. It's really interesting.
And also you could probably use
Lucho Libre, the tacomancer.
You could probably use the cup as an arcane focus, although it seems a bit fragile.
So there we go.
Yeah, so I hope you don't mind me saying so, but you seem to like really niche ideas in an indie industry.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yes, and no. So like, and this is part of the reason that Cats did so well, right? The marketing approach that we try to take is to talk to people. It's not that we're ignoring the game space, but I'm not really, I don't have a lot of celebrity. I'm not like a known quantity in the industry, so I have to be a little creative about how I get the word out there for my stuff. And with Cats, and we're trying to do the same approach with the T game, we are trying to reach out more and spend our advertising more on people who love the thing that the game is about, as opposed to people who love games. Because being an indie game in a crowd of other Kickstarter projects that are making a ton of money is a pretty challenging endeavor. But being the only game in a Facebook page or a group or a market full of tea-loving people or cat-loving people is way more exciting to that group. Like a CatCon, when we went to the way we launched Cantankerous Cats is we launched it at CatCon. So we had that to plug into. And we made like half of our funding the first day because we were just launching it the same day as the biggest cat convention in the country. And everyone was like, oh my God, what is this cat game?
Yeah.
You mean there's a cat game? And we're just like, playfully ignoring all the other ones that already exist. Like, yes, there is a cat game we made just for you. There is a cat game. We made this game just for you. Although that part is not a lie. We did make the cat game just for the cat people.
So were you playtesting or were you running demos at CatCon?
Yes, we did. Not like officially because we didn't have the money to buy a booth at that point.
Yeah.
We were just like
guerrilla style.
Yeah, two indie artists like, hey, we got this cat game in our pocket. Play it on the convention floor, and then everyone was just like, oh my God, this is great, and then just handing flyers to people.
Is that a cat game in your pocket? Or are you just happy to see me?
Both.
Yeah.
We are happy to see you with the cat game in our pocket.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically it. It was total guerrilla marketing. And it paid off because, now
because there was no other cat games at CatCon.
Yeah, there were no other ones. And then by the time that we finished and we had come back, we had become the cat game, even though there were others that came after us.
Yeah.
And we had like the big fancy, like we had enough money to do like the big fancy booths because we knew we would make it back. Like we knew we would consistently make, $4,000 or $5,000 at that show. So why not spend, a quarter of that on a 10 by 10? And we always went all out with the decorations too. So like we're again theme first. So even when we just had the tiny artist alley table, it was always decked out with like high Victorian, high tea sort of look, because the whole joke was that cats are fancy.
Oh, nice.
So they want everything to be fancy, and had the game sitting in little teacups and all that stuff. And people respond to that when you are able to go to that, when you're able to, and this is part of the thing I definitely feel this in the middle of a pandemic without that community to plug into. That's for being an indie. That's really what makes the connection, what gets people excited about you and your product. They're actually not getting excited about your product. They're getting excited about you as the person sitting at that table and the energy that you bring. And how much effort you put into presenting, because they're like.
So, when you're making the cat game, you're like, well, these other games, none of them make me feel like a cat or a cat owner, or really, capture the essence of what it means to be playing a game about cats, right? So, What was the approach for creating a game about tea?
Yeah.
What were you trying to nail down?
I really wanted to nail down. So it's hard because tea is so broad. So that was part of the nailing down the narrative as opposed to the mechanics of the tea was a little bit more challenging. But what we settled on was, and this is like how I'm dressed right now. We wanted something that felt timeless and that felt culturally independent. So like there is stuff in the game that's borrowed from Asian tea cultures and Indian tea cultures and English tea cultures, a little bit of everything, but very subtly. because we didn't want to feel like we're catering to like any one particular market. And we wanted to really capture that aesthetic of that cute, adorable coffee or tea shop that you find in like those mountain neighborhoods or those little quiet neighborhoods like Silver Lake down here or like Fremont up in Seattle, where you walk inside and you don't know what their aesthetic is, but you know it's cute. Like, I don't know if y'all in the chat or you have experienced that when you walk into a cafe, you're like, I don't know what they were going for here, but it's uniformly like, I just want to hang out in here for a while.
Yeah.
And I dig that vibe, that aesthetic, eclectic sort of like cafe vibe.
When it captures the quaint.
Yes. So that was kind of narratively what I was going for with Prosperity, outside of the flow of, you know, you are this barista making your tea and serving it to people. Also trying to get the vibe of like, I even have trouble phrasing it right now because I couldn't find a phrase to describe this. But the non-specific comfort of walking into a cafe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you know, yeah, it's because it's a feeling, and sometimes they're much harder to describe.
Yeah,
as a concept or an idea.
Have I ever had a dragon eat my cats? No, my cat is way too cantankerous. I think he would win every time.
And Joe always asks, "What's your favorite dragon?" Because he asks everyone. But I will change that to, "What would a dragon's favorite tea be?"
Oh, that is a really interesting question. Because they're old. They've drunk all the things.
Mm-hmm.
I think they would probably be really snooty because, you know, they're ancient and they've seen everything. So they would probably like a nice, like a pu'er or a lapsang tea. Probably more so pu'er because it's an aged tea. So like it takes time to make a good pu'er. And the dragon doesn't care because it's forever. So it can wait 5-6 years for this thing to ferment. That's yeah.
I don't know if you're expecting that question today. Now I want to make a dragon NPC that collects tea brewers. And,
tea brewers.
If you satisfy the dragon, he does not eat you.
Make me a tea, human.
Yeah, a tea worthy of my station. If not, doesn't go so well.
But that also might like buy you time, right?
Yeah.
If the dragon is collecting you to make this tea, you'd be like, well, I have this one thing I can try, but I have to ferment it for like 10 years. I promise you it'll be worth it. And then you'd have 10 years to either do the thing or outsmart the dragon.
Yeah. Or 10 years to think about how you're going to get eaten by this dragon.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
So you got black coffee screeching hot. Oh my gosh, Brian Smith.
Yeah, yeah.
I noticed another one up there too. Let's see. Oh yeah, Doug. Thank you for digging games with explicit gameplay. I appreciate that comment. Again, as a designer, my MO is just to make sure that everybody's clear about what's going on at the table.
Doug is our content director, and that is definitely one of his bugaboos. Is like when he opens up a game, whether it be RPG or otherwise, he wants to be able to read like 3 sentences of like, this is what this game is and this is what it does.
Yeah, fair. And I also enjoy that approach as well. Again, as much as I love the crunchy Euros or the big like miniature combat type games, occasionally, I get real aggravated when they just don't tell me on page 1, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah, why are we playing this?
Yeah. So why? I want the why, because it can even if it's not like explicitly mechanical, it can do a lot to fill in the gaps for people as they're learning the game. And like using my own games as an example, like Cats, when people like, especially because it's a Magic the Gathering style game, so it's a little much for the newcomer to take up. But when you frame that narrative, be like, Well, try not to think about the tactics so much. What would your cat do?
Yeah.
Then it immediately starts clicking for people like, oh yeah, my cat's real shitty. He'd probably just like cuddle me and then go rip up some furniture. I'm like, exactly. That's what you're doing here.
Right. Well, the important part is, though, they cuddle you, then they go over to the couch, and then they look at you, and then they proceed to begin clawing at it.
Or like another tiny cute game that's not mine that I like to bring up a lot is Heartland Hauling Company. It's a tiny card game about trucking. And they're real clear in that. That's your goal. You are a trucker. You're going from point A to point B. You're going to pick stuff up. You're going to drop it off. Like, so if you ever get lost, that's your goal. Like, what are you doing? What's your game state? Do I have stuff in my truck? I probably need to get rid of it.
Do you get involved with unpubs and game jams?
Occasionally, again, especially since I did work with Indiecade. So, I was actually, one year I was the director of the tabletop section at Indiecade, and it's real. And I was part of a group called First Play LA, which still exists. We're just kind of weird in the pandemic times, and that's kind of the basic feedback I give to a lot of people. Is make sure your gameplay goal is clear. Like, even if your game is not narrative, even if it's abstract, it's always useful to find that narrative through line so people know what to do if they're lost. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I was reading a question from the chat.
Yes,
and paying attention. Not my strongest suits. Yeah, but Brian wants to know, where do you fall on the spectrum of game mechanics accurately representing how a thing works? Steps of brewing tea versus mechanics generating a feeling that matches sipping some tea.
Right. That is a really good question. Because it's definitely a spectrum. You can be super accurate, or you can be like creatively representational, and anywhere in between. I tend to fall on the accurate side of things. But I make concessions to representation when it doesn't make a fun game, or when it doesn't make the game fair or too much. So like in Prosperity, for example, we definitely made some concessions on how the flavors would mix. We based all the order cards and stuff on real recipes with real ingredients. But there's one deck called the Flavor Deck that has a bunch of broad categories of things: spice and citrus, and like the things that you would normally put in a tea blend to make it taste like something that's not quite straight tea. But if we put every ingredient that existed in the world, that would not be fun to play. You would be hunting through a deck of like 40 cards for the one card, and that doesn't help. So instead of having like ginger and vanilla and chocolate and stuff, when we make the order card, we're like, well, what broad category of thing does this fit into? So like, for example, if a tea needed vanilla because Earl Grey, then it goes into the spice category. So we have you pull the spice card, and it's a stand-in it's a generic stand-in for a broad category of stuff.
Because otherwise you'd just be pulling cards all day and looking for that one specific card.
Yeah. And that's like, not to name names, but there are a couple of games, because I don't want to be like negative, because I love these games. But there are a couple of games out there that are big, like Euro building type games, especially like civilization building stuff, where you're like, okay, I'm going to get some random resources and random cards, but there's a deck of 200 of them.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to make synergy in a deck of like 200 random cards that are all unique?
So the chat is just taking an interesting twist. They're now going to ask you what every mythological creature would
what
drink
would a leprechaun
for a
drink?
tea. Yeah, Joe wants to know, what would a leprechaun drink?
Oh my lord. Let's think about this. So, I mean, it depends on. Okay, so what's your idea of a leprechaun? Is the first question, because I'm also part Irish, so I know the lore.
Yeah.
And I even got, as silly as it is, I even have this big book always buy because
Oh,
I'm starting to.
nice.
Yeah, I'm
I mean,
starting to
we got our
invest.
Lucky Charms leprechaun. We've got our
Yeah,
horror movie leprechaun.
yeah,
St. Patty's Day leprechaun.
yeah. Same, but like, so I'm just gonna go with traditional Irish leprechaun, which are real shitty. You know, like all Fae are. Fae are chaotic creatures. They just love messing with humans the entire time. So they're like that would probably like to drink like the stiffest, like blackest tea. Um, just because it's like nice, it's nice and bitter and fermented, kind of representational of how they feel towards people.
Yeah.
Um, and then put a little bit of spot of honey in it, because what they would probably take pleasure in is knowing how to make that like really acrid drink absolutely fucking divine with just the right tiny little amounts of configuration.
Bittersweet.
Yes, like bittersweet.
Yeah.
And then maybe hand it to a human and watch them spit it out, and then totally demean them for like, you know, that was the most expensive tea I had in my collection. That is very rude.
Yeah, because well,
Yeah.
especially because of leprechaun, they might use like the most expensive, rare, and exotic of honeys.
Yes. And
Yeah.
like, and then just totally hold it against you when you can't hold that drink. Like, you're no, you're being so goddamn rude, and now you're mine because you broke you broke the
Yeah.
rules of hospitality.
Oh
Um,
yeah, the Fae.
yeah, because they're still Fae. Like they're very
Yeah.
specific, but they're still Fae creatures. So that's my answer for what would a leprechaun drink. The most disgusting fucking thing they could find, and then
Make
figure
it
out how to
divine and
make it
use it to trick you.
delicious. Yes.
I kind of want to play that character now. I kind of want to play a Fey Warlock that gets duped by a leprechaun for drinking, for spilling their tea.
Yes. You spit it on the floor. Ah. That was the other one. Oh my gosh, there was another question, right? It's yesterday called the. I'm also looking at chat.
Yeah, yeah. So what? So what comes after tea? I mean, you kind of mentioned it and hinted at. I don't know if you want to talk about that at
Oh
all.
yeah, I can talk about it. The coffee game.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's two. There's the dog expansion to cats, and there's the coffee game. Um, the coffee game is macroeconomics in a box, essentially, but like really,
yeah,
but really distilled. Because basically, you are Starbucks. That is the angle of the coffee game, and you are trying to run a profitable venture. Um, the basic core of that game so far is there's three phases. It's like the three parts of the year, right? You have the I love the Halloween is never over, especially not today because it's Dia de los Muertos today, which is a holiday dear to my heart. Just finding chat. Sorry, back on target.
yeah,
There is the acquisition phase. So you're acquiring, basically it's like a round robin auction sort of thing, similar to Cyclades, where you are bidding for coffee beans. You're trying to acquire as many beans as you can. And after that phase is done, you move to a second phase where it's just whoever has the least amount of resources gets to go first, and you go back up the ladder. And then you start putting your beans into roasteries. So that way you can process these beans, but you're going to lose some of it. So we introduce shrinkage. And then the third phase is getting your stuff out into the market. So like Seattle, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, all like whatever coffee markets that are all
yeah.
out there, getting your stuff out and getting it sold, and hopefully doing it well enough where you can turn a profit.
So it's a coffee game, but it also kind of is giving off like a Monopoly kind of vibe,
Yes.
where it's more about economics than it is about coffee.
Yes, which is the joke at the core of the game, because this is also with the coffee game. It is hardcore political satire. As the way that I have all the board, I started doing sketches, and the way that I have everything lined up is very dry and like spreadsheet like, with just enough character for it to not be boring. Because the joke is that nobody in your company knows where Ethiopia is. They just know that's where the beans come from. and
Nice.
nobody knows where Los Angeles is. They just know it's a point. They just know it's a point on a map where beans go to be sold. So it's really removing the player from the process. And but all the spaces on the board can be upgraded with marketing cards. It's like a marketing deck in the game. And the joke is when you flip over the marketing cards, it's stuff like build the school, build the road, build some docks, build an airport, and you're going to improve these little farm areas. Not because you think it's the nice thing to do, but because they all give you a benefit or they all improve that space. So like if you build roads, you get more beans from that farm because less of them fall off trucks and whatnot, right? When you build the school, the output of that farm is increased, not because people are smarter. And that's the big joke in that game is you're doing everything and you're upgrading all these spaces with tangible things that real coffee companies do all the time. They're like, hey, we're going to put some money back into this environment that we went in. But if the farm wasn't there in the first place, they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
So it's real big socioeconomic commentary on just kind of the state of the world.
So with that game, who are you looking to market it to? I mean, is it about the joke, or are you going to be like, all right, I'm going to market this to coffee connoisseurs?
It's about the coffee for sure.
Yeah.
Because that's the line that I want to toe is pretty fine. Again, this is not only is it going to be my first big box game, but it's also going to be my first attempt to really do a satirical, like hardcore political commentary piece. But the line to walk, and I learned this a lot at my experience with IndieCade, because we have a lot of political games at IndieCade, is if you're trying to deliver a message, you don't want to be preachy about it. You want it to be very subtle and very buried in all the mechanics. And it's not really going to show itself unless people start thinking about it critically. And then they're like, oh, wait, maybe there's something here that is not just a coffee game. Mexican coffee. Ooh, yes. I definitely have a soft spot for Mexican coffee because, my family's from Mexico. But
there's a comment about Ethiopian tea. I know Ethiopian food is really good. My brother had turned me on to that, and there's some good restaurants in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Actually, I'm not sure if Ethiopia is a tea growing region. I know it's a coffee growing region for sure.
I almost feel like everybody has some kind of tea or another.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tea. So at least for the tea industry, as far as it goes, most of the tea comes from Asia and India. And then there's a couple of tea plantations in America that don't do enough business to really be considered like a part of the industry, but they're here and they grow tea, and it's weird that they do. Yeah. We actually call those out. Like all the cards in the game have a little factoid about all the teas at the bottom, so you can learn, again, accidentally learn about tea when you play this game. But yeah, there's a tea plantation in South Carolina. They're now owned by Bigelow, and they're called the South Carolina Tea Company. They're real creative. And there's one up in Washington State, and I forgot the name of it at the moment because it's in my notes. But that was going to be a thing too. We're like, provided, once we get this game off the ground and fund it, I wanted to do a little like excuse to make documentaries, right? Like visit those two tea farms and be like, hey, everybody, this is how your tea is made.
So with the cat game, you kind of had like a very strategic way of marketing that that worked. Did you have the same for the tea game, but you couldn't do it because, well,
yeah,
all this.
Because we're all stuck at home. So
Yeah.
I can't yes, because we actually did have, the chef that I'm working with has been going to tea conventions and tea shows for about a year to drum up their own business. So they already did this work. And when we did this game, we're like, yeah, we're just going to hit up the same things. And then we're just going to be neighbors because I'll get the booth right next to you. And then it'll be all set. But, then COVID happened. So, sorry, Pupper is outside.
No worries. We are pet friendly here.
Yes. So yeah, we had that planned, but obviously that does not exist right now. So, my thought for this Kickstarter attempt was just like, I want to finish something this year. I have a little bit of money on loan from the government because that's one of the things that I was able to take advantage of was the small disaster relief. So we're like, all right. Oh, sorry. Hold on a second.
Okay. Well, Al will be back momentarily as his dog has a minor freak out. So, and then we can talk more about tea, cats, and coffee. Maybe the dog expansion as well. I wonder if there's a dog con in the works for that.
I am so sorry about that.
No worries, man.
I think we had a random spam person come to my door and throw something on it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And your dog was defending the castle.
Yes, my dog was defending the castle. And if I'm not there to monitor him and tell him to calm down, he just...
Our dog does the same, but even if you tell them to calm down, they don't stop.
Yeah.
So...
Dogs, they're so great at most things.
Yeah.
So anyway, now that I'm back, where were we?
Well, we were talking about the tea marketing, the plan that couldn't happen.
Right. Yes, because COVID.
Because of COVID. So do you have a similar plan for the coffee game?
Yeah, it would be similar. We'd just be going there's barista competitions. Do you know about that?
I do not. I'm learning all kinds of things today.
Yeah, there's like barista championships and whatnot. So
I don't know why it makes me think about it, but they have like rodeos for like construction equipment for some reason, like things like using a forklift to pick up an egg off the ground without breaking it and stuff like that.
Oh my, that actually sounds really challenging. All right. I saw a question from Brian in here. What level of complexity is perfect for a game that can easily be played in the coffee shop? Something small, takes enough to finish a couple of cups. So that is actually a tricky question because it would depend on the coffee shop for one. But there is a game I worked on with a friend and colleague of mine called Tabletop that was actually designed for that explicit purpose. And that would technically be the next game that I would think about launching after Prosperity because it's already done. I've done I worked with them on rules consulting and product development. It's just a small, tiny little game, fits in a bag, and it's a wagering game. So it's like very slight probability. You're doing a little bit of quick math in your head. The kind of game that you can teach in like 30 seconds and play in 6 minutes.
So, I mean, we talked about your games and, games in general. What kind of games do you like to play? Like, do you like, like epic long games, fast games?
Oh man, I love them all. But I tend to favor the long, crunchy Euro games, which is not what I make. Because, there's plenty of those games out there for me to enjoy. And I have a soft spot for games, and this is what I try to make. I have a soft spot for games that are really easy to onboard, that fit in like a tiny space in a tiny box, but have a really big experience to them, or they have, multiple layers, more than meets the eye. Like again, pull Heartland Hauling Company out again because it's in my pocket example.
Yeah.
Of a game that surprised me because it fits in this tiny little box. But there's enough meat there with just a few cards and imagination where you can't really approach the game the same way every time. There's just enough randomness in there to shake things up, but there's enough strategy where you are making decisions and you're not just letting the game play itself.
I think those games are great and important too, because they're the things that kind of like can suck people into the hobby. Instead of going like, here's Arkham Horror, clear schedule for today, and we're gonna take an hour and set it up, and then we're gonna play the game.
Yeah. And then on that end, again, some of my favorites are like ones that take all day to play. I played a game called Imperialism 2020, and I love it. And I only played it twice because it's really hard to get people in the room that want to commit to being there for about 4 hours. And basically arguing with each other civilly.
Yeah. Not with a really good lure and good solid locks on your doors. I think that's what you need.
Now that you're here for game nights.
Yes.
Did I tell you it was going to be a sleepover?
We're going to be doing this for a while. So we were up on the hour mark. Final thoughts before we head on out?
No, I mean, thank you so much for having me on. Really like the work that you all do. Thank you for chat, for participating. This is our final day for Kickstarter. So you can back Prosperity now. It is $29.99. It comes with tea. And we're looking to hit 20,000 by the end of the day. So this is the day to rush. This is the day to get that last push. Yeah, we're really proud of it. A lot of people are responding very well. We've gotten a super positive feedback on the game as a whole. And maybe next time I'm on this thing, we could talk some Dungeons and Dragons, because that is another part of my life.
Awesome. Can they also do catnip tea as an add-on?
Not yet. You can order the catnip. You can order the catnip tea from the Cantankerous Cats website. But you can order bags of tea. That would be one of those things where, since you're here in the chat, if you add it to your pledge and just send me a message that says, "Hey, I want catnip tea instead of this regular tea,"
yeah,
we'll just make it for you, because we hand make everything. It's all nice. Yeah, it's all hand mixed.
Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. It's been great chatting with you. As always, folks, description, you find the links. After this isn't live anymore, there will be a pinned post in the comments for you to go check it out. I'll also add a link to the Cantankerous Cat, so you guys can find that as well. And until next time, stay nerdy.
All right. Thank you very much. Stay nerdy, everybody. Bye.